Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. This is going to be a recent reads video. Recent reads videos are videos wherein I talk about the books I have most recently finished reading. This time I have 4 books to talk about. I try to do these things in allotments of 3. This has been an extended period since the last recent reads video I made. More than a month, I think. I slowed down, not for any good reason, but it just happened that way. So let me jump right in. I should say that, and there is a cat there. We're off to a good start here. So, I have a playlist with all of my recent reads videos wherein you can catch the sum total of everything I have read during this period of booktubing. I won't put a link or anything. You can just go to my playlist. So, I have finished 4 books, and let me just talk about them briefly. This will not, as I say, be a comprehensive review, but I will tell you a little bit. Richard Henry Dana Jr. was a student at Harvard, and sometime in the 1830s, his eyes had been bothering him, and so he felt he needed a break from studies. So he signed on to go as a member of a ship. This was a trading vessel departing from Boston, sailed around the Cape, up the other side to the California coast, and he wound up spending 2 years in the journey, as the title would suggest. The book really was a wonderful read. I had finished reading Joshua Slocum's book, Sailing Alone Around the World, before, and it was a nice book as far as sort of a sportsman's journey. This was entirely different. Slocum was, I would say, a bit self-focused and had no particular insights about any of the peoples that he encountered or the sights that he saw. Dana is quite different. You read this book specifically for that purpose. He is a good writer, at times even an eloquent writer. I think there's at least one excerpt which I have up somewhere on my channel recently that I would invite you to listen to. So the ship sailed from Boston, and I don't remember the timeline exactly, but I believe he got to California. They went up and down the coast a little bit. And then I think he spent 4 months or something like that, maybe even more, off the ship working on the coast. And what would happen was they would be collecting hides. If you go to Wikipedia, there's an interesting entry. The hide trade in California was a big deal for a period of about 20 or so years. And they were extracting resources from California, both hides and tallow. He goes into great description about everything you might need to know or want to know about the processing of the hides. Tallow is just sort of an afterthought. And you realize through the course of reading it that he was just a cog in a huge capitalist enterprise. he felt that he was working for a pretty good company. Other companies were not so good. But taking that decision to sign onto a ship was a bit of a gamble, because once you were on board the ship, you were not your own man, so to speak. You belonged to the company at that point, or even more specifically, to the captain. And he had to wheedle his way to get back within the 2-year period. He might have been stuck for an even longer duration than he did. He fortunately was from a little bit higher of a class than many of his compeers on the ship, and so he possibly had connections which he could draw on, and people were aware of that. And so they perhaps gave him some leeway, which they might not have given another person. As I say, his writing is really marvelous if you want to understand what it was like to be on a sailing ship in this era. There is hardly a stone left unturned. I don't think that really works as a nautical image, but I will just leave it. The only, I was, a month ago, I had been in Evanston, and I saw that there was a lovely edition by the Library of America of this and other writings by Dana. And I had debated over in my mind, should I buy that? And my ultimate decision was no, I'm not going to buy it. And then I just happened to go to Evanston a couple of days ago, and it was gone already. So I'm glad I made that decision. But the reason that I made that decision was there is a concluding chapter. And in the concluding chapter, he decided to write a little something about the well-being of sailors and what could be done to help improve their lot. And it came from a generous impulse, but the reading it was a little bit boring, honestly. And in later editions, at some point, 24 years later, he went back. He went back to the area. I think he was sailing on to somewhere else. I can't remember. Possibly Malaysia or something. And he revisited the old places. And so in later editions, after this was written, that final chapter of his, the original final chapter, was replaced with his look back 24 years after. And that, initially I was only going to read one, and I thought I would only read that first one, but after I finished it, I thought I should go on. And I'm glad I did, because the 24 years after segment, while it too lacked the interest of the exciting shipboard narrative, still, he reported on all of the changes in California since that time. He had no high estimation of California natives, but during the 24 years since he had sailed there, it had been scantily or scarcely populated, and great cities had grown up, and he discusses that. So from a historical angle, it's very interesting to read. But the whole book itself is just a marvelous adventure tale. As I say, he was under pretty good conditions. It's been a nautical year of reading for me. And Death Ship, the novel by B. Traven, which is based on some kind of true life experience, that novel presented an almost horrific experience of shipboard life. This was much better than that. As I say, Dana felt he was working for a good company. Really a good read. So I read Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, and I really enjoyed this. This is a quick read. Here it's slightly over 200 pages, but it didn't feel that way. I read it through in a day, which surprised me, but the pages are not tight. You can see there's a lot of space between the lines. Is that called leading? I can't remember. I'll give you a hint of it from the description on the jacket. In a country teetering on the brink of civil war, two young people meet. Sensual, fiercely independent Nadia and gentle, restrained Saeed. They embark on a furtive love affair and are soon cloistered in a premature intimacy by the unrest roiling their city. When it explodes, turning familiar streets into a patchwork of checkpoints and bomb blasts, they begin to hear whispers about doors that can whisk people far away, if perilously and for a price. As the violence escalates, Nadia and Saeed decide that they no longer have a choice. Leaving their homeland and their old lives behind, they find a door and step through. Exit West follows these remarkable characters as they emerge into an alien and uncertain future, struggling to hold on to each other, to their past, to the very sense of who they are. Profoundly intimate and powerfully inventive, it tells an unforgettable story of love, loyalty, and courage that is both completely of our time and for all time. A very fair description of the book, I think. I enjoyed this immensely. I first heard about it from Quaint and Curious Volumes. James referred to those doors as magical realism, I believe. And I had not known quite what magical realism as a literary term meant. One hears it in reference to 100 Years of Solitude, which I have not read, but I think I have a better feel for it now. The doors that the jacket leaf speaks of are almost like teleporters. Isn't that what Star Trek used to use? Beam me up, Scotty. Well, they get beamed to another locale. But beyond that, the book is not unreal. It's not some kind of scientific adventure. And so these teleportation doors are merely a device to move the characters from one scene or one setting to another. If it were a Victorian novel, you would have to devise a reason for them leaving more. The reason was pretty clear, but you would have to devise the means in greater detail. You would have to show them going to the train station window and buying or whatever. I don't think the moves they made were a little bit more extensive than just buying a train ticket. But regardless, to fill in all of those blanks would have entailed so many pages of just needless explanatory material. I said it reminded me of in George Eliot when somebody happens to walk down the street and they see the person in Rome, say, who's wearing the exact ring. You know, it's that person wearing that ring in Rome of all places. Well, it's just a means of just cutting to the chase, just moving the thing on. And so they go through a couple of teleportation doors, and in each case, they are moved into a different situation. And it is always the situation of the refugee. So the first episode talks about the city in its phase of destruction. Very, I want to say lurid almost, but very, very precise, I think, in its description of what it must feel to be in a war-torn city like that. And then every step further in the refugee camps and so forth, there is a verisimilitude which seems to harken back to lived experience. I don't know how Mohsin Hamid got his ear so well to the ground, if he did research or merely talked to people or was just part of a general milieu. But it is vivid, and the refugee crises that we see occurring all about us have not lessened and will only increase with the climate exacerbation. So this book came out a little while ago, 2017, but it remains relevant, and it is a very enjoyable read. In a similar vein, I read The Gallery. I went in thinking it was fiction, but it really is a memoir, lightly fictionalized. John Horne Burns was in the army, I guess, and he served a little bit in Africa, a little bit in, and now I can't think of the second place, and a little bit in Naples after Naples fell to the Allies. He was an intelligence officer, and the stories are little vignettes about the people that he encountered or observed, both service personnel and Italians or Neapolitans, as he would say. And the centralizing figure or device is the gallery, which I believe it still exists as the oldest, shopping mall in the world, something like that. It was a gallery. There had been a enclosed skylight of sorts that was bombed out during the war. I would love to go to Naples and see it. And all of the characters, in one way or another, seem to have connection with this gallery. They go through the gallery. Most of the book, I found it a little bit tedious. The stories were interesting, some better, some worse, some longer, some shorter, some more compelling, some less compelling. But I read a couple of excerpts also on this channel, which I would invite you to hear also fairly recently. And one of those, the first was on page 259, titled Naples. And from that point on, the book took a turn for me, and I found it absolutely delightful. I really almost don't know how to explain that. He describes Naples, and he describes the wrecked ships strewn in the harbor. He describes certainly what life was like for the natives of the city, the citizens of Naples. He describes what servicemen were going through, say when they had to go to the VD clinic. And so you come away from the book with a very good picture about the war, and it's a very different portrait than, the John Wayne hero portrait or the soldiers in the field portrait that we are accustomed to from Hollywood movies or even the usual war novel, because again he's dealing with the supporting players, if you will, nurses, that sort of people. And I thought I would just read a little bit more. A very nice vignette. He's following, this is towards the end, following a soldier named Mo. He goes through, in this episode, there are about 4 or 5 different adventures succeeding each other. And this was a fairly poignant moment, so let me read it to you. Mo paced slowly back in the direction he'd come. Near the palace were stairs going down to a urinal. At the entrance to this subway, an Italian boy of 18 in dark blue shorts and a monk's cloth shirt open at the neck was lounging. For a swift instant he looked steadfastly at Mo, then dropped his eyes. His face had the removed, contemplative beauty of women beyond the moment of their spasm of love. "Let us not waste any time," the Italian boy said, looking past Mo out into the bay. "Will you give me a cigarette or will you not?" "I don't care for your salesmanship," Mo said, unbuttoning his breast pocket, "but you can have this whole pack. I don't smoke myself." He put another toothpick between his lips and watched how the boy took the pack into his fingers and stroked the cellophane. The boy's lips moved, but nothing came out. Then his eyes veered from the bay over Mo's shoulder to Mo's face. They were black Italian eyes, calm yet full of a passion of ink when it falls into words. "You know, of course," the boy said, "that Neapolitan boys would do anything for this pack of cigarettes. I would or I would not, depending on how I felt toward you. I am a Lucchese, you see." "If you think that cuts any ice with me," Mo began. Then he saw no point in heightening the wall between the boy and himself. It had been flung up by the boy himself, a hasty reflex masonry of sorrow and pride and fear. "Who taught you to speak such perfect English?" You Americans taught me everything I know of evil and hate. Last month you shelled our house at Viareggio, and you killed my mother, who would not leave the house because she loved it. And you Americans have taught me things I never dreamed of. Best of all, you taught me that hate is stronger and lasts longer than love. For all the things you Americans have done to me and wish to do to me and with me are hateful. Every time I see you or touch you, I hate you more." "And you hate yourself too," Mo said. "We didn't teach you that." "I don't care any longer," the boy said, accepting the flame from Mo's lighter. "None of us Italians does. We've been bent this way and that, so all we want to do now is live, just exist, however shamefully and ambiguously. We will live off you Americans, off your food, off your drunken spending, and we will yield to your desires, no matter how beastly they may be, for a price, you understand. But you should hear how we talk about you among ourselves. We sear you and we scald you, because we hate you. To hear Italians talk about you when they are together, you would think we were discussing a pen of pigs and vipers, because we hate you. And no matter how you degrade or possess or kill us, there is always our laughter at your vileness, laughter so scathing your cheeks would burn up and your bowels explode to hear. There is nothing in the world sweeter than Italian love, and nothing fiercer than Italian hate. Don't you sense it everywhere about you? But I make no pretenses. I am a Lucchese from Viareggio. I do not smile and fawn on you like the Neapolitans. I tell you frankly that I hate all Americans, and Americans desire me even in my hate. That's the depth to which you have sunk. Razza di porci, di finocchi e di mostri. Your mother should hear you now, Mo said, turning away, and I guess she must have been a very beautiful lady. Wait, please, the boy called, crushing out his cigarette and running after Mo. I have some photos of her. When may I show them to you? Signor, Mr. Lieutenant. After the war, Mo said, increasing his pace. But may I see you tonight? The boy begged, the coolness of his voice breaking into a whimper. I'm afraid not, Mo said, but enjoy the cigarettes. Tomorrow night I may be near Viareggio. I'll think of you and your mother, for I'm sorry, very, very sorry. Believe me. Turning back at the San Carlo, he saw that the beautiful Italian boy of 18 was standing with his face in his fingers, weeping like no one who hates. So that was not the final story. It continues a little bit. So there were about 90 pages of it where I was just on board with this narrative altogether. I was not tapping my fingers or whatever, doodling in the margins. So all in all, it was a good read and a further justification for why, in my own case, it is best not to DNF, do not finish something too swiftly. DNF is BookTube ease for not finishing a book. So I am glad, very glad that I continued with this book. I believe the author died young, something like 35 years of age. Everything fell together for this to become his masterpiece. He tried writing other things, but I don't think anything else worked so well for him. And then the last book that I finished was Stephen Runciman, The Great Church in Captivity. Earlier in the year, I read The Fall of Constantinople by Runciman, and I thought that this book would take up where that one left off, and indeed it did. So he follows the history of the church from the time of Constantinople's fall right up until modern days, or to the emergence of modern Turkey. And I learned a lot. It was a bit hard going at some times. Runciman fills his narrative with miniature portraits of so many figures involved on the scene. But you get a good sense of the church struggling to survive underneath the Ottomans. So I thought when I finished that the next ideal place would be this old book that I have, Bernard Lewis, The Emergence of Modern Turkey, because he really leaves off with Ataturk. There might be a sentence or two that goes after that, and so this would be good, but I decided that I am a little bit weary of the region. I want to get away from Turkey for the time being in my reading. And so I decided to go to China, and I have begun, you can't read the author's name because of this, Mark Edward Lewis. Let me see if I can show you a title page. Mark Edward Lewis. And I'm only a little bit in. I've read this about 250 pages, I think. No, 160 pages. Many years ago, and DNF'd it. It was, his writing is good, but it was very hard to absorb the material. I think after this period of, I don't know what it is, at least half a decade, probably more than that, I feel that I am more prepared to handle all of the details and understand what he's talking about, although I still have a little bit of trouble with the geography. So that will be on the slate for next time, if I finish it. For my fiction read, I've decided to jump into Daniel Deronda. I was thinking about either this or The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, and I decided to go with this because I wanted the comfort of an old friend rather than the discomfort of trying something new. So Woman in White will still be there in the wings, possibly next month for Booktober, a BookTube event. I would very much like to read that as well. So it's a big novel, and I'm not struggling to rush through it, so it may well be longer than a month before I do another recent reads video. Almost certainly it will be a long time till the next recent reads video. I have just picked up Uncivil Rites by Stephen Salaita. He was a teacher at University of Illinois and was let go, I think because of some tweets which were in support of Palestine, something like that. This book is from 2015, I think. And I thought I would just read you a little bit that I picked out from the thing. I'm not really sure that I'm going to read this, but it's an addendum. Speaking in times of repression. What to do about injustice. How to counter it while attempting to put food in our bodies. These are questions for which I have no solid answers. I hear these inquiries a lot lately. I do not resent them. I admire the minds from which they emerge. All humans are well served considering such questions. I'm simply not very good at answering them. The first thing to recognize is that it has always been a time of repression. Find who profits from the existence of injustice. When you do, you'll have simultaneously discovered its cause and solution. A couple of pages later, what should I suppose I'm trying to say, if you feel called to speak, it is okay to be scared, but don't be silent. Ultimately, speaking publicly in support of the wretched is a deeply personal choice. Individual situations differ. One person may be in a better position to handle recrimination than another. Those with family money or powerful connections have the luxury to rabble-rouse that doesn't exist for the single mother or the immigrant who sends her paycheck back home. People of color are more likely to be criminalized for dissent than their white counterparts. What should we do is not a universal question. Consider also that the labor of minority scholars is already politicized. We have to publish more. It's risky to be introverted because so many white colleagues cannot tolerate a minority who doesn't pretend to like them. We have to act as diversity representative on all sorts of committees. We cannot be mediocre because our tenure and upward mobility rely on senior colleagues who reward only their own mediocrity. It's hazardous for us to show emotion because we're aware of the possibility of confirming to others our innate unreason. Adding activist leader to this list of tasks is a heavy undertaking. In many ways, simply deciding not to appease power is an active form of advocacy. It is the activism of survival. I know that many students and scholars of Palestinian origin feel compelled to act. To them, I say, do not fear the pro-Israel activist industry. Yes, they have inordinate resources and influence, and yes, their actions can be vicious. But suppression is not a long-term strategy. It's the tactic of one whose ideology has no merit beyond the force he can summon to impose it on those with less power. Please do not misread me. Israel's supporters, as they have illustrated for many decades, are content to rely on suppression as long as it can effectively preserve their colonial fetish, no matter how many constitutional rights they destroy. Suppression relies on the anxiety of its targets. It is sustainable, then, only in relation to our quiescence. So with that, I'm not sure I'm on the fence with this book. There are bits in it which I don't really care for. It may well turn out to be a book that I just flip through. But I felt that it nestles pretty nicely with the segment that I read from the gallery with the Italian boy, and the reminder that repression has been a constant is well kept in mind. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.